Hello and welcome to what month is it? August. Blue School, Alabama Blue School for August 2024. There's a lot going on for Democrats this month, and I think we're all feeling very happy. Um, we are doing Blue School tonight. For those of you who don't know what Blue School is, it is a monthly training session. Can you guys hear me, by the way? Okay.
Yes.
Blue School is a monthly training session where people who are engaged in local democratic organizing can get together and learn from one another. We have guest speakers and we try to look at topics that are relevant for Democrats in the state of Alabama. So this is where we learn from each other and teach each other and form connections and networks. And this program is put on by UDeCal, which is the United Democratic Clubs of Alabama. And that's just what we are. We're just a working group of local organizers who know that we can get more done when we work together and when we cooperate. So that's what we're trying to do. For tonight's Blue School, we have the wonderful Elizabeth Anderson, who is the Democratic candidate for the United States 6th Congressional District this year. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's
Little bit
exactly
of little bit of number blindness. U.S. Congressional District 6.
right.
She's a wonderful candidate, and tonight she's going to talk to us about how she ended up as a candidate, talk to us about some of the things that she's learned during her candidacy, and maybe we'll all learn something, and hopefully this will encourage all of us to follow her example and run for something ourselves. So I'll hand that over to you, Elizabeth, and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really excited to come and talk to y'all because I think lots more people should run. It is not as scary as I think sometimes people think that it can be. So I really want to encourage more people to run because we need more people running, particularly Democrats. Republicans are really good at playing the long game. They run somebody in every election up and down the ballot, whether they have a good chance of winning or not. I was telling someone the other day, Terry Sewell has a Republican challenger right now because the Republicans are great at always running someone in every single election, every time, hands down. And they play a really good long game, and we need to catch up to them. So I want lots more people to run. I want people to know that it is not as challenging, or there are challenges, but it's not as scary as it sometimes can seem like it can be. So really want more people to be running. So I thought I might start with how I decided to run for office, because it is not necessarily the traditional way, although I'm not sure exactly what the traditional way is. Um, for me, I always wanted to run for office, but I did not necessarily have a plan for doing that yet. But I knew that I wanted to run, and I had told friends of mine that I wanted to run. So people knew that this was something that I cared about. And I've always been sort of politically active, although I had not run for anything just yet. Now I'm running for US Congress, classic first run for office, right? Like most people start a little bit lower, but the reason that I came into this one was because I live in District 6. Gary Palmer is our representative. I've been in this district for a long time, and I have felt dissatisfied by our representation for a very long time. So the qualifying deadline rolled around. It was November 10th of last year. And a friend of mine who knew that I always wanted to run said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And she called me up. It was very funny because she texted me like 100 times and was like, "We have to talk." So I finally was able to, I was on some calls and things for work. And so I was finally able to call her about 10 a.m. And she said, "You need to run for office." And I was like, "That's a lot at 10 a.m." Like what? And she said, "Well, we haven't had a Democrat run in this district, in 6 years, since 2018. And you're always saying that you want to run for office, and you're mad about some of these things." And I was like, "Yes, I am mad about some of these things. In particular, the Dobbs decision was really upsetting for me. And then right on the heels of that, in October of that year, all of our labor and delivery units in Shelby County closed, which was absolutely devastating. And I was mad. She was right. I was mad about these things. And she said, well, it's the qualifying deadline today. So if you're going to do it, you have to decide right now. And I was like, this is a big choice to make, at 10 o'clock in the morning, like on a random Friday. And so I sat down and I thought about it. And, she and I talked a few times, and she said, well, if I can talk to some other friends of ours and we can cover if we can cover your qualifying fee, will you run? And I said, sure. Yeah. Okay, fine. Let's do it. So she did. She made some calls and I made some calls, and I talked to our lovely Marcia and talked to Wayne Rogers as well, and decided, okay, well, let's just do it. Let's just put my name on the ballot for no other reason than we will have somebody else to vote for, right? So the way that I described this when I was talking to friends of mine about it was, this was more of a decision to make a decision, right? Because there's lots of ways you can do this. You can choose to just be on the ballot and that's it, and do nothing else and not raise, or you can choose to actually run a campaign. So I said, I'm just going to make a decision to make a decision. I'll put my name on the ballot. For a long, long time, I've been so dissatisfied and not had anybody else to vote for. And for years, I had just been like writing my own name in because I could not stomach voting for our current representative. So I just wrote my name in for all those years. And somebody said the other day, they said, oh my gosh, you've been campaigning the whole time and you didn't even know it. I think that was you, Emily. And so I did that. Then I spent some time in November and December over the holidays deciding, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to actually run a campaign, or do I just want to have another name on the ballot? Which is valuable. I need to say, it is very valuable to have another name on the ballot. So I spent some time. The way that I operate is that when I'm not sure about something, I just go read a million books about it. So I went to my local library, which is your best friend. Anyone on this call listening, if you ever have a problem in your life, go to your library and they will solve it for you. So I went to the library, read a bunch of books. I read some articles and did some online training and listened to some podcasts. And I kind of learned what it was about. I met with my kitchen cabinet, which was my book club friends, and I started working on like a clear picture of what I cared about. Then I learned about the difference between testing the waters versus running. So testing the waters just means that you're sort of putting together a committee, and for different races, it looks a little bit different. For this particular race, it's if you spend or make $5,000, then you are no longer testing the waters. You are now officially a candidate running for this race. So for me, I was like, why test the waters? Why dip my toe in when I can just cannonball into the pool? So that's what I did. I decided to actually run a campaign the best that I could. Even though, like I said, just having a name on the ballot is completely valuable and valid, I decided, well, let me just see what I can do to run this campaign. Hired a fundraiser because you have to make money. That is the most important thing. We'll talk about that later, but that was the very first thing that I did. And then it's been off to the races since then. So, we've got the fundraiser. We have been raising funds. We've seen a lot of traction here lately. Things that are kind of picking up. We have field efforts out now. We're doing lots of events. So things have really picked up from there. And I have been running since, January-ish. Right. So qualified in November, said, let's do this in January. And since January until today, August 20th, I have been running a campaign. Now that's very hard for me because I'm a mom and I work full time. I own a business, right? And when you own a business, you can't just take some time off. I'm also not independently wealthy, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, why that is going to come up. But we are running this campaign and we're going to try to run the best one that we can. So that's kind of enough about me. I want to talk about people who want to run for office and what that looks like. So I mentioned the qualifying deadline earlier. So a lot of people say to me when I tell them, hey, you should run for office, they say, well, I've thought about it, but I'm not qualified, right? Or I can't do that, right? The thing that I want to tell everyone that says, I'm not qualified is that, yes, you are, right? Like you are absolutely qualified. 100%. So what the qualifications are, you do not have to be wealthy. You do not have to be an attorney. You do not have to have graduated from an Ivy League school. You do not have to have an influential family. You do not have to be a local celebrity. So, those things make it easier to run a campaign, certainly, but they're not required. I'm not independently wealthy or a lawyer. I did not go to an Ivy League school. I'm not from an influential family. In fact, my dad is an abusive addict and he's in federal prison right now. So, I'm not a celebrity or anything like that. I'm just a regular mom in this district. It would be easier if I was all those things that I mentioned, but you don't have to be. And when you look up the qualifications for your race, you will notice very quickly that it says that you do not have to be a wealthy lawyer to run. There are lots of people in all walks of life, and we need that, right? That's who we need. We need people who are regular moms, and we need people who are like hard workers, and we need school teachers, and we need everybody from every walk of life to run for office. We don't want to just be represented by, the exact same mold of whatever a politician looks like. Trump literally never held an office before in his entire life before he became the president. He is a convicted felon. He is running for office. Y'all are more qualified than he is. Right? Like, absolutely. So, your experience is your expertise, right? You can run for office. So I don't ever want to hear anybody say that they are not qualified, that they cannot do it, because you can do it. You absolutely can do it. I promise you. And if you have questions, I promise I will help you as much as I can too. All right. So if you are not a wealthy lawyer from an influential family, there are going to be some challenges that those other politicians do not face. And that's true. And I'm facing them myself. But that's okay, because we just get past those, right? Like, the trick for me is we identify what those challenges are and we look at them and then we just work around them, right? So for me personally, a big challenge in this race is time. Federal races in particular take a whole lot of time. A lot of candidates take time off work in order to be able to do that, but I have to work. And I'm a mom of school-age kids. So they keep me really busy. So that means that for me, I have to sacrifice a lot of the time that I would normally be resting, and I have to be really, really ruthless about prioritizing my time. A lot of candidates put in their own money. So there was a race recently where a guy put in $300,000 of his own money for his race. I don't know about y'all, but I do not have $300,000 just laying around to put into a race. So, lots of candidates are wealthy. Some of us are not. You don't have to be wealthy to do it. But that does mean that you have to do a lot more fundraising, right? It would be so good for my race if I had $300,000 to just throw into it. But alas, I have not won the lottery. It's kind of like that meme that says, I haven't won I haven't won the lottery. I wouldn't tell anybody, but there would be signs, right? So you do not have to be wealthy. Another challenge for me is that there's an incumbent in this district. It's a really red district. The incumbent has raised $1.5 million. No one has run since 2018. So we sort of have a limited infrastructure here. And a lot of people in this district feel pretty hopeless. That's another thing that I'm trying to, go up against. Another thing that can be a challenge for people who are running is sometimes it can feel stressful if you have a certain background, right? I talked to a lady the other day, and she mentioned to me that she would really like to run for office, but she didn't feel comfortable doing that because of, a past family situation. And that's, I think that's a question that people have to answer for themselves. It can be challenging, but I don't think that people should let their backgrounds prevent them from running for office, right? So I grew up below the poverty line in an abusive household. I mentioned that my dad is in federal prison. I'm estranged from a lot of my family. I'm the first openly LGBTQ candidate to run for federal office in Alabama. And also, I'm a woman. So these are all things that can be challenging demographics for a candidate who's running. For me, I'm always really open about my background, so it doesn't feel like a challenge to me personally. I always tend to feel like, if somebody doesn't like those things about me, that's their problem and not mine. But I would recommend anybody who is, thinking about running for office to think about how comfortable you are talking about those things, because it does come up. I'm very okay with it coming up, but not everybody is. So that's something to think about. Also wanted to tell you that people will absolutely ask you the weirdest personal questions you have ever heard in your life. Like complete strangers will ask you some strange stuff. I had a guy tell me the other day that he thought that I should put my children's school and pictures and their grades on my website. And I said, thank you for your feedback, you know. So I've had people, you know, say some kind of strange stuff or like really personal things. I've had people ask some stuff that you would be really surprised about. So it's going to come up. So I think that those are some of the challenges. Let's see what else. For people who are thinking about getting started in this field, I wanted to touch on how you can do this. So I made a few notes here on, you know, what would be beneficial ways for you to get started if you are thinking about running for office, but you're not quite ready yet, and you're just like considering it, like how can we do it? One thing is to start getting involved in the community. So a lot of people can volunteer for campaigns to get some experience. So campaigns, I can tell you, need a lot of help. So if you want to start by phone banking and text banking, that's a great way to start volunteering your time. Or you can we've got some people on our campaign that are super volunteers that work more directly within the campaign and are sort of folded into the infrastructure. That's a great way to get some experience. A lot of those people in this campaign are people who want to run for office eventually and want to have a closer look at what that's actually like. So that can be really helpful if you can sync up with somebody. I always recommend people join local organizations that you care a lot about. So if you're, you know, interested in abolition, then maybe get involved in some groups that are related to that, because you can learn a lot in those groups. You can meet a lot of different people who would be good supporters for your campaign, and you can sort of shape your ideas around some of these things. Vote every single time, right? Up and down the ballot. Like, do not miss going out to vote. Get involved in your local elections as best you can, and really like go and vote every single time. I actually had someone ask me, why did I, so go back to the personal question. I had someone who asked me why I did not vote in 2012. Yeah, it went all the way back to 2012. I was having a baby, right? So I felt like I could get off the hook for that one. But people will ask you, you know, people will say, what were you doing in 2012? But make sure that you're voting, not just because somebody will ask you, but because it's important. And it's, you know, the top of the ticket is not the only thing that matters, right? And then the last thing I wanted to say about like how to start getting involved is join your county party, because they have resources and they have people they can connect you with. Marcia, who's on this call, is in our Shelby County, is chair of our Shelby County party. And she has just been such a gem and so helpful in this campaign, particularly for me as a first-time candidate who did not know some of the ins and outs. The county parties have really been very helpful in helping me kind of understand a lot of the local dynamics, and then introducing me to people and helping me find resources and helping me connect with people and telling me about events that were coming up. I've been doing some stuff with the Jefferson County Party to even do like voter registration, which is a really important thing for me. So they can really help you with a lot of these things, or they can say, hey, we're going to be at this event. Do you want to come table with us? That can be so helpful, especially for a candidate running a kind of a new campaign. All right, so now you've thought about doing it, when you decide to actually do it, where do you go from here, right? So I have been telling people to start with what makes you feel really passionate, like what is broken in your community right now that you care about the most. So this is the best way, I think, to find what you want to run for. A lot of politicians run on ego, and they just want to boost their careers. We don't want to do that. As Democrats, we want to be fixers, right? So it's a lot easier to be that type of person if it's, you know, if you're running for something that you really care about. And that will help you decide what you want to care about. Personally, I am hugely invested in creating a federal law to enshrine the right to an abortion. This is the biggest driver for me. I think that it's wrong that it was sent to the states. This is to be a federal issue, absolutely, in my mind. And that's why a federal race was right for me. So if you're a person who wants, more flowers planted at the community center, then maybe a federal race is not the right race for you. Next step is, once you've sort of figured out where you want to run, I would recommend that people think about how it's going to impact your life. So how much time are you going to need for this race? Some candidates do absolutely nothing. I mentioned this earlier, you can be on the ballot and literally not do a single thing. There was a lady who ran in an election last election cycle, and she ran as a libertarian, and she literally did not do one thing. She didn't raise. She just put her name on the ballot, and she got a good percentage of the vote, right? So, and I think that's valuable too. So doing that and just putting your name on the ballot is important, but you can also run a campaign, right? So when you start running the campaign, you need to start thinking about, how am I going to fit this in my life and career? Can I take some time off work if I need to? What does my family think about that? Like, where do we kind of take this? And then once you identify how you want to run for office, then maybe find the qualifications. Like I said, you don't have to be a wealthy lawyer, but there might be some age or residency requirements. It's not going to be anything crazy, but make sure you meet them. When you Google it, you're going to see some candidate guides. They're going to be long and scary. Don't let them scare you, but do make sure that you do your documentation. So do it on time. Get a PO box for your documentation. Make sure you pay your qualifying fees. Find out your WIN number, and then and then you're off to the races. Now, I know that we're getting pretty close to time. I have some other things that I can talk about with regard to what you do when you get started, like what about the money piece? Like, how do you find out your messaging? I can keep going there, or we could bring English to talk about some of those things.
Keep going. I think, yeah.
Okay. Well, in that case, I jotted this down because somebody gave me this advice kind of early on in the campaign. They said that you need 3 things, right? You need money, messaging, and mobilization. So that was scary for me, because I was like, man, how do I do any of those? Right? Like, I've never run for office before. But what I have found since then is that a lot of these overlap with each other. And I see that English is here. So we'll let her talk more about the money here in just a minute. But that's the number one. I brought on a fundraiser very, very quickly in this campaign, because literally everything is going to cost money. This is why rich people do this, because it's expensive, right? But don't let that scare you, because you don't actually have to be rich. You just have to be able to fundraise. So you are going to need so much money to reach voters and buy campaign tools and hire staff and buy ads, but you are going to fundraise to be able to do that, right? And there are lots of ways that you can do that. English is going to talk more about that, but you're going to ask your friends and family, and you're going to do what's called call time, where you're calling different people, and you're going to request endorsements, and you're going to do house parties, and you're going to do fundraising emails and texts. I did find it really helpful to hire a fundraiser on, because you do actually need money for everything. But when you start trying to raise money, make sure that you have a place that you can raise money. So day one, right after you get that PO box and file your documentation, go ahead and get a bank account. You're going to need an EIN, and then you're going to need to get a bank account. And so when you get that bank account, right after you do that, go set up an ActBlue. So you have a place to put the money, and you have a place for people to give you the money, right? So you really need that right away. And I wanted to share with y'all, I jotted down this quote because it was so great. It's from Terry Sewell. She said, "I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking about money. I'm asking for the people of my district." And you have to ask specifically for money, not just help me however you can help me. Instead, you have to say, can you give me $1,000? So you're going to need to get really comfortable asking people for $1,000. And like I said, English is going to tell us more about that. Next, you're going to need a messaging. So you need a website, you need social media, you need a clear picture of your policies. So for me, I started with a bullet point list of all the different policies that I cared about. I found that very helpful, because it helped me talk about things that I care about and be prepared when somebody asked me questions about them. So if somebody asked me a question about school funding, I had already sort of thought about that. It also helped me write copy for fundraising emails and social media. I would recommend anyone getting comfortable with finding whatever is the absolute hardest, most controversial question that someone is going to ask you, the thing that is like really scaring you, and getting really comfortable with that answer. So if you do not do that, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, because you're going to be standing somewhere with a microphone in your hand and someone is going to ask you that really hard question, and it is going to suck because you're not going to be prepared for it because you were trying to avoid it. So it will not suck so bad when they ask that question, because you're going to be prepared for it. So find that. Write a stump speech, right? You need a 1 minute, a 5 minute, and a 20-minute version. You can change it as much as you feel like changing it. You can modify it when you're talking to different groups. So do your stump speech, and then I want you to immediately forget your stump speech and just get comfortable talking off the cuff, because people are going to ask you things, right? People are going to ask you, somebody asked me about a specific technology, having to do with mining the other day, and I did not know about that technology. And sometimes people are going to ask you stuff that you don't know about. So get very comfortable being able to speak off the cuff, and then figure out how to get in the press. If you figure out how to do that, call me, because when it's really hard, it can help to talk to your county party friends with that one too. And then lastly, mobilization. So, think about what your win number is. You're going to have to reach all those people. And depending on the size of your race, it could be hundreds of thousands of people, right? So you're going to need to start thinking about phone banking, text banking, managing your volunteers. You're going to have a lot of volunteers and they want something to do. So give them something. For me, I hired a field person to help me with this. This has been really, really helpful. But that costs money. So you have to start with fundraising. So that's kind of my general how I got started, and what advice I would give to potential candidates. Like I said, English is here. So maybe we can give her a few minutes to talk about the money piece, because she is a wizard with it.
English, talk to us about money. Tell us about it.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. I was not prepared to talk. I thought we were talking to Elizabeth. I'm
Uh-huh.
happy to talk about money or anything you guys want. Do you guys, let me ask you this. Do you have any like specific questions, or do you just want like a quick overview of what I do? Because I'm
Well,
happy to come back and do like an actual talk. I just wasn't like, I have a slideshow and stuff that I could show, but I'm like not
yes, we should
prepared.
definitely meet sometime. Well, does I have a couple of questions
Great.
Do it.
for Elizabeth or for both of you. Does anybody else have any questions? Do we have specific questions about fundraising, or things that we think anyone watching this video might want to hear about? Annie says no. I have questions.
I have questions.
We all have questions. Marcia, Brian, we've got questions.
I was going to say,
Awesome.
let me ask one really quickly. English, what would you say to someone who is thinking about running for office, but the prospect of fundraising is really, really scary, and they're terrified to do it? What would you say to that person?
I would say that it is so like the approach that I normally take is that we like to start with personal Rolodexes, and there's lots of reasons for that. Lots of reasons for it. And I can get into that more later. But one of the relevant reason I think is that calling your girlfriends, calling your sister-in-law, brother-in-law, and asking them for a lower dollar amount starts to build emotional momentum. Because then those are the people that, maybe they're teachers, maybe they're not, maybe you don't want to ask it. Maybe they're wealthy. That's great too. But even if they're not, we always start with family and friends, because those are the people that love you as a person, and they are a lot more prepared to contribute because of that. Usually, not always, obviously, but usually they just want to support you in whatever you're doing, regardless of whether they live in your district or they're, you know what I mean, like they even care about what you're doing. A lot of the times, if we start with people that love you, it can help the candidate build momentum. And so even when you start making those calls and raising even just a little bit of money, you start building momentum, you build courage, it starts to feel better. And then by the time we start going out to acquaintances or even strangers and cold calling, then you've got $500 in your bank account. You raised all of that money, you feel really good about it, and like you're prepared to move on and do something else. I'll also say that as a fundraiser, oftentimes, unless it's an in-person event, I usually am not the one asking for money. But in the state of Alabama, if you're running for judge, you're not allowed to ask for money. And so there are all kinds of little loopholes we utilize. But one of them is just that I make the calls. You know what I mean? Like as a fundraiser, like I make the ask. And that has been really helpful experience for me as a fundraiser because I got to sit in your shoes and I got to really experience like that uncomfortability of making that hard ask and sitting in that uncomfortable, awkward silence and like really have an understanding of like, yeah, this is shitty. This is the part of fundraising. This is the part of campaigning that everyone hates, no matter who you are. And that's okay. But like, we do it together. You know what I mean? And so I just try to offer like a level of support and understanding and just this like, acknowledgement that it's shitty and nobody likes it.
Can
And
I,
that's okay.
is it okay if I jump in with a little anecdote about fundraising?
Please.
Okay, so this is about my husband who ran for State Board of Ed in 2018. Now, he is one of these guys who I think was probably told since he had his bar mitzvah that, oh, you're going to be a senator one day, Adam. You know what I mean? Like he has
No
debate.
pressure.
Well, but like, how we're saying there are some people, most of them are dudes, who've been thinking about this their whole lives, and they went to Boys State and they were pages in Congress, and they majored in poli-sci or whatever. They've really been preparing, and my husband is one of those people. So here's what I'm thinking. Let's borrow some of the stuff that he did, as someone who just sort of stepped into it and was like, of course, this is my space. This is what he did when he was running. He grew up in Western Virginia. He scheduled a little fundraiser with his high school debate coach.
That's right.
And his parents and his like best friends from high school who had moved back into town. And he gave a little speech, and I don't know how much money he made, but my point is, we can look at the people. So for those of us who may not have been planning to do this our whole lives, we can look at the people who have and kind of borrow some of their little tips and tricks. And I just wanted to jump in because it sounded very familiar to me. And these are things that we can do. And yeah, we can copy from people
Yeah,
who
absolutely. It's definitely something where whoever told him to do that, I did that training too, right? Like so Emily's List does this training and that's what they
he
talk
just
about.
knew.
So
Yeah.
well, then he just like knew, but that's absolutely what we're taught as fundraisers, and what we try to teach our candidates as well is that like you start, and like I can show you guys this on my little whatever. I have like a drawing that I think helps visually explain this a little better. But like you start with people and then that you're close to, and then you move out. There's like this circle graph that Emily's List draws that was really helpful to me. I'm a visual person. And so I always try to draw it for my candidates too. But one of those circles is like, it's not quite an acquaintance, but it's like you need to have one thing in common with these people, like groups of people. And so my big ask of my candidates, and this takes a ton of time, it is always valuable, it is always worth it. And sometimes they don't do it, and that's okay too. But like we ask that you make lists like of clubs. So like that high school debate team, sororities, cheerleading teams, your daughter's soccer team dads, make lists, and you only need to have one thing in common with them. And sometimes that thing is that you guys were in high school debate club together, and that's okay. And living out of state, living out of district, doesn't give a shit about politics, you'll find that it doesn't matter. So long as we craft the ask appropriately and we're prepared and we're willing to make the call and put our neck out there, you would be shocked at how much money you raise. And I tell this story all the time, and I think I'm obviously going to let this candidate remain nameless because I think she would murder me if she knew how often I told this story, but it is too funny not to. But she was doing these lists for me, and she sort of accidentally, she was trying to go through like old friends. You know what I mean? Like, which is what I asked to do. I'm like, peel it back, go before law school, go before college. Like, who are we talking about? And she accidentally ended up making this list of like literally her ex-boyfriends. And we joked about it, you guys, and years, decades had passed. Okay. Everybody's married with children. Everybody, I mean, it's nothing romantic. We made more money on that list than we did any of her other lists. People that lived states away, hadn't heard from her in 10 years. So excited you found something that is working for you. Let me send you $500 right now. I was floored. I was like, I'm going to make everyone do. And she totally just stumbled. You know what I mean? She was just trying to, she was doing what I suggested. She was like journaling out, like think it through. We raised so much money from those poor
Amazing.
men.
I
Poor men.
want to link this into one of the questions that I have for both of you to talk about and for all of us to discuss. And Marcia is a candidate as well in a county level race.
Yes.
So my questions are I would love for us to have a discussion about like sort of more overreaching issues about what it means to run for office as a Democrat in Alabama. Because I think if we're thinking about doing that, we have to have a different way of approaching it. We have to have a different way of sort of identifying what our goals are. And you've touched on this a little bit, Elizabeth, what our goals and objectives are for our campaign or for our candidates. And I just wondered if we could maybe talk a little bit about that. Like what does that mean to us to be running for something when we know there's a pretty good chance we're not necessarily going to win, but how does that affect how you structure your race or how you think about it, how you approach it?
Okay, I think about this like 9,000 times a day, actually. Like, so I love this question. So part of running as a Democrat in what is perceived to be a super red state, and I say that very intentionally, is that there's a lot of like hopelessness around it. So it's very hard for us to get people out to the polls. So people don't, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that we're doing to ourselves here. People feel hopeless. They don't go out and vote. They certainly don't run. And then there's no one else running except for Republicans. So this state looks a lot redder than I personally believe that it actually is. That may be a scorching hot take, but I know that there are lots of Democrats in this state because I talk to them every single day, and they're out there and they deserve representation. However, we're stuck in this cycle where we're hopeless, we don't run, we're up against this big Republican machine where they're just like have gobs and gobs of money, and it seems like they have all of this on lockdown. But the truth is that like they don't, but we have to look at it as a long-term thing, right? We cannot look at this as, this race and no other race, right? Because the truth of the matter is that I know what the odds are of winning this race. Okay, like I understand that. However, we have got to start doing something, and we have to start building infrastructure, and we have to start going, because otherwise we're just letting them win, right? If it's a relay race, they are miles ahead of us. And in a lot of these races, we don't even have anybody picking up the baton, right? The baton is laying in the dirt in a lot of these races. And the Republicans are way ahead. And it's like I mentioned earlier, they run somebody in every single race. They have got somebody running against Terry Sewell. That person's crazier than I am, right? Like they have less of a shot than I do, right? But they run somebody and they build infrastructure and they play the long game so well. And so we have got to be able to get better at playing the long game and understanding that this is not like a one and done deal, that like we have to keep at it and we have to keep working, and that it's going to take some persistence and it's going to take some, grit for us to do it. But we have to come together and really do this thing, right? And we all have to have, the other thing is that we have to have each other's backs. So we can't get hopeless about it. And we can't give up. Like, we have to all be here and lift each other up and support each other, because we are also not going to be able to do it alone. And again, the Republicans, they're not doing it alone, right? My opponent is sitting on $1.5 million. Okay. He didn't do that just by himself.
Mm-mm.
Lots of people came together behind him to be able to do that. And so we as Democrats need to be able to do the same thing. And we can, and we need to be able to believe in ourselves. And so, when somebody early on in this race was like, it's so hard to be a Democrat here, which is true. People are going to be so mean to you and horrible and, snub you. And I have not really had that experience, it really has. And I have talked to lots of Republicans. I have talked to people who are personal friends of my opponent, and we're perfectly lovely. Do you know what I mean? So it's not that way. We don't have to be vicious enemies to each other. We're all friends. And, I would want to be able to lift up people in the state, no matter what their political party is. And so the more that we polarize ourselves, I think it makes the problem worse. But when I am thinking about how do we come together, I'm also thinking about how do we reach Republicans too. And that does not mean that we have to be moderates, and it doesn't mean that we have to be centrists, because I'm certainly none of those things. But it does mean that we might have to approach other people with empathy. And I have seen Republicans get excited about this campaign for that very reason. So it's not a lost cause. And if we treat it like it's a lost cause, it will be, but it's not.
So what does that look like? Sorry, if I can follow up. So when you approach your campaign that way and you realize what the numbers are and what the odds are. So for example, this fool Republican who's running against Terry Sewell, why? Like, what are the objectives there? Like, obviously they might have some data objectives, they might have some whatever. So maybe we take a lesson from their book or something. So what are those? What are the objectives that we're going for in these difficult races?
So I can't speak for the Republicans running similar races, but I can tell you that for me, a huge part of it, I'm so sorry about my kitty cat. I'm so sorry, I'm a cat lady. Cat ladies for Kamala.
Yes, miserable cat lady.
So I can't speak for the Republicans or why they do it, but for me, part of it is all these years that I have just been writing in my name, I have been so angry that people will say this thing to me. They'll say, this is 100% red district. Well, that's not true. This is not a 100% red district. Okay. Like, it just is absolutely not. But we don't really have data on that. So we have a like rough sense of what the data is. And we can look at things like what primary that people vote in. But again, I'm so sorry, but my husband, he votes in the Republican primary every single time. He is not a Republican by any stretch of the imagination, but he does that because he basically wants to vote for the less crazy candidate. He feels like it's a strategic move to vote where his vote matters, I guess. And when I go and get my Democratic primary ballot, a lot of times I just get like essentially a blank piece of paper, And so, but he's got this long ballot. And so all of the data would show that he's a Republican. So my campaign, if we were going out and trying to reach Democrats, my campaign, looking at him, he looks like a Republican and not somebody that we might reach. So we would miss him. But he's totally a Democrat. Do you know what I mean? And so part of this is a data problem. So we don't know. We really don't have a clear picture for District 6 of how many Democrats are in this district. So a huge part of it is just data collection for me. The other part of it is building some momentum because we need some energy to move forward, or we're just going to keep being hopeless forever. When I first started running this campaign, people were totally depressed. Like, I could not tell you the number of people that I talked to that were like, call me if it gets competitive. Do you know what I mean? Or they'd be like, this just feels like, I might as well be setting my money on fire or something. But now, as we're starting to see momentum, those same people are starting to donate. So, we do need to build that momentum. And then the third thing for me is building infrastructure behind it. So we have some wonderful county parties, but we also have some counties where we don't have good county, we don't have good county infrastructure in place. But there are good Democrats out there in those counties too, even if we don't have the infrastructure. So part of it is connecting people behind an idea and building donor networks and networks of people who, are willing to host fundraisers for candidates. Those people are very, very important, not just to this campaign, but to any campaign. And we need people to be able to step up, but sometimes we don't necessarily know where they are because we don't have anybody running for like federal seats. So I think there are a lot of different things that are wins that do not necessarily have to be an electoral win. Oh, and then one final thing, this is the last thing I'm going to say about this, unless you want me to say more, is one thing for me, for my opponent, is that he has never, I felt like, spoken to things that were really important to me. So maternal health care. I'm a mama, and it is very scary to have a baby here in Alabama, especially since we don't have a maternity ward here in Shelby County anymore. But I do not feel like my representative has spoken for me. Well, he doesn't have to, right? Because he doesn't have an opponent, like nobody's up against him. He's just been sailing through these elections. So why should he bother with some of our voices? So I want to prove a point that like we are out here and he needs to speak for us too. So I recently went and visited his office when I was in Washington, D.C. I stepped by there. They told me that I was not allowed to talk policy. And I was like, what are you talking about? We are like literally on Capitol Hill. Like, what? This is where policy is made and we're not allowed to talk policy here. Like, it was crazy.
Also,
but
the First Amendment, I'm pretty sure you can
Thank
talk
you.
about whatever you want to talk about.
Exactly. And so, but I just had this thought when I was leaving his office was, I want to be able to go back in there and say, look, this is the percentage of the vote we got. These people care. These are your constituents. These people want you to talk about these things. Like, time to do it. So I want to be able to push our incumbents also, which is a really important thing for me.
Just basic accountability for
Yes.
our elected officials.
And it doesn't exist right now because nobody ever runs. So
That's it.
he doesn't have to pay attention to us, but like we're going to make him.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for addressing that question. Anyone, I know that Marcia and Brian, you both had questions too. Marcia, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. When I spend a lot of time trying to recruit people to run for office. And one of the things they tell me is, it's not that I'm not smart enough, but I don't think I know enough deep down dives about the issues facing whatever my constituents might be. I don't know enough, for instance, I don't know enough about what a county commissioner does and what issues they work on. Or I don't know enough about what the county school board does and what they work on.
Yeah.
Or if I'm trying to recruit somebody for a House seat or a Senate seat, where do I go to learn about the issues? Where do I go to take a deep dive and educate myself about the issues? And I was just wondering how Elizabeth approached that.
Oh, how I personally approach that may not be the same way as everybody approaches it. So like I said, I have always just been really interested in politics. I was that really weird kid when I was in high school and I loved C-SPAN. Like, really spent a lot of time with C-SPAN in my teenage years when everybody else was sneaking out of the house. Like, I was a huge nerd. I still love C-SPAN. So I've always been really invested in politics because it was always so clear to me personally that our politicians make a lot of decisions about our daily lives and how we live our lives and what we do and what we can't do, like every single day. Like, we're using internet right now, and our politicians are making decisions about whether we can use that. You know, I'm sitting in my house with lights on, and that is an issue that is impacted by politics. So, all of these things are so closely intertwined. I'm not sure how, I don't necessarily have a resource for, like, it would be so cool if we had something that was like, this government position does this government position does that, this government position does this other thing. I think that would be helpful. I have not personally seen that. But I do think that getting involved in local elections, like we talked about earlier, can be a good sort of primer to see, and just paying attention to who's running and what their issues are. So if you see somebody running, I always think that it's so strange, and this may be like a hot button issue, but I think that it's so strange that our coroner position is a partisan position, right? Like, it's weird, right? But it is a partisan position. And so when I first found that out years and years and years ago, I was like, why the heck is this a partisan position? And then I was like, oh, well, of course it's a partisan position, like, given our current political climate, because, if you think back to like COVID, right? COVID was a hyper political issue, and your county coroner might be the person who's deciding your cause of death for that. And so these can really be partisan positions. So just and the whole entire reason that I got interested in that, and I even cared, was that I saw literally a sign on the side of the road that was like, vote for this person for coroner. And I was like, what? What? And so then I read up about what it does. And so I think just looking up for, what the elections are and what people are running for and like what are they about can be really helpful from that perspective. I do wish there was a good list, though, that was like, this position does this position does this, because I think a lot of people don't realize how impactful something like a school board candidate can be. A school board candidate, the school board has enormous power over like our children's lives and education. And people seem to get so caught up in, Joe Biden this, Donald Trump that, Kamala Harris this, like the presidential level, that they don't necessarily realize that, like, the reason that you are buying glue sticks and Kleenex in the store for your school, your back to school list, is because of your school board seat. Right. And that is such a more direct impact on your life. So I think maybe just going back to getting involved in local elections. Marcia, do you have any ideas? Marcia, County Commissioner Queen.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree. I do agree with you. I think when candidates aren't certain, looking on county websites about and looking at who the elected officials are and what their websites, the actual websites, not when they're running, but what the websites say that the people that are elected in those positions do. I think that can be helpful. I hadn't thought about looking, though, at other people's opinions on issues. In other words, your opponent's opinions on issues, or another person who'd run for the office. But that's a great place to start when you're trying to decide and flesh out your own issues bank of what you're going to decide, or your top 3 or top 5 issues. That's a great place to look, is at what other people who've run for your office have held to their hearts, but also what your opponents are saying and thinking. That's a great thought. So yeah, I like that.
And then also, just one more thing to add was, I think too, like, what you care about can kind of guide you, because if you really care very deeply about something in your community and you're like, this is very messed up, and you can kind of think to yourself, okay, who can solve this for me? Right. So I'm not trying to put Marcia on the spot, but there's this recycling bin at Herdmont Park, and it is like the bane of my existence because it is always too full. And so I can never put my boxes in it. And they got rid of our recycling in our county. It's a whole entire thing. I have been so livid about this, but like county commissioner, right? They can fix that
Yeah.
problem for us, you know?
Yeah.
And so if you're mad about the Herdmont recycling bin being always full, maybe run for county commissioner.
That's right. It was certainly one of my issues and one of the
Yeah.
reasons that got me going. When we lost our curbside recycling, it really irritated me to no end. And the answer I got from our commissioner that only one bid was put in and it was all we had. And I'm like, why didn't you go after other bids? And it's like, oh, we're just, I don't know, anyway. So yes, I'll be quiet now, but yeah, that was a big one for me. You didn't put me on the spot at all, Elizabeth, not at all.
I just want that to be fixed so deeply. It is also a huge issue for me. But yeah, like get mad. Like y'all get mad about something. Like
And that's kind of a missing piece too. And I think especially for women is knowing the things that I care about, the things that are important to me, and then that gap between caring about it and then actually getting involved in a way that changes something. It's hard for us sometimes to cross that gap, but now's the time to do it.
yes, do it.
Yeah, Brian, you had a question. We are low on time, but go for it.
Yes, just real quick. If you had to pick one thing that you enjoy the most about running so far, what would that be?
Oh, that I enjoy the most. This is really hard because okay, you know what it is? Honestly, y'all are gonna think I'm such a nerd. I just told you about my love of C-SPAN. I have loved learning about campaign finance. Like it's so nerdy. There is this really great 212-page campaign finance guide by the FEC. I read the whole thing. I was dazzled by it because it is such a weird mix of like very specific rules and then like huge gaping loopholes, right? And so I've called the FEC like a bunch of times. Like they're probably very annoyed with me by now because I'm like, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? They have a lot of rules for your like private jet, but they don't have they haven't specified a lot of these other places. So I have really enjoyed the campaign finance aspect of it just because I enjoy compliance and I like making sure that we are crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's, but it's also very interesting. And it gave me a new perspective on what our politicians are actually doing, because it would be very easy to launder money. And I bet a lot of them are doing it. And that freaks me out.
$10 billion from Egypt, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And I find that very scary, but I think it's something that I'm more interested now in fixing about the system because now I can see all of these areas where it's broken. And it really helped me shape my sort of values around campaign finance because I take it very seriously. Heaven knows that English knows how seriously I take campaign finance, but that is maybe boring, but I really enjoyed it.
That is such a great answer. That was a great question, Brian. Thank you. I'm going to wrap it up on that note, but here's where I'm going to wrap it up. I look forward to seeing the bill that you co-sponsor on campaign finance reform in the coming year. I think that's where we're headed, y'all. We're overturning Citizens United, and I can see your name on there. I can see it happen. Let's manifest.
That's beautiful, Emily. I love it. That's beautiful.
That's part of your story, right? Is like running with the financial, all of these issues really come together, which is great.
They do come together. And it's like you said, I came from this background with a lot of financial hardship and I run a business now, but my business has a lot of sort of transparency rules, which I really like for accountability because we're a benefit corporation, which is a sort of different kind of business. I love that. And I have loved how transparent campaign finance is in a lot of ways, because you can go online right now to the fec.gov website and you can see all of my contributions and you can see everything that I'm spending money on. And I really appreciate that a level of accountability, but I want more of it in our government because we should be able to see this every time. So like, heck yeah, let's overturn Citizens United. I am here for it.
Well, thanks so much, everybody. We're going to wrap it up. That was just a wonderful discussion. We are going to have this video available on the UTCal YouTube channel, and we hope that people watch this and get some ideas and get excited about running for office. And we're going to continue having these conversations about this issue. And we hope to hear from both of you more in the coming months and years. And I'll just say thanks to everybody so much. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, English. And thanks to all of you who came tonight. And let's go see what's going on at the convention.
All right. Thank you so much.
Good night,
Bye,
everybody.
friends.
Yeah.
Thank you.